Some hotels are just places to sleep, but some are more. They watch you, they wait, and if you stay too long, they don't just change your plans, they change you. Tonight, you'll step inside the doors of the Blackwood, Ashmore, and Hawthorne hotels, places where guests check in, but leave forever altered. 3 terrifying stories of hotels that don't just host travelers, they reshape them, erase who they were, and turn them into something unrecognizable. Are you ready to enter, or will you be the next guest who never leaves the same? Story Part 1. The first thing you notice about the Hawthorne Hotel is how quietly it waits for you. It isn't grand or ornate. It doesn't shine with neon lights or boast a marquee like the newer places on this side of town. It just sits, tucked between an abandoned theater and a row of boarded-up shops, as if it's always been there, silently counting the people who pass by without ever looking up at its faded sign. Most people don't give it a second thought, but the ones who do, well, they never leave the same. I found it one late October evening, driving home after a business trip that had gone wrong in every conceivable way. My car's engine was coughing. The GPS kept rerouting me down narrow streets that seemed to loop back on themselves, and the fog had thickened to the point that the headlights barely cut through it. When I saw the Hawthorne's dimly glowing sign flicker in the mist, relief hit me like a wave. A place to sleep, finally. The lobby was smaller than I expected, with dark wood paneling, heavy curtains that seemed to absorb the light, and a thick smell of something I couldn't immediately identify, like iron mixed with dust and a hint of smoke. Behind the front desk, a woman with pale skin and black hair pulled into a tight bun gave me a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Welcome to the Hawthorne," she said. Her voice was soft, almost hypnotic. "Room 12. The key is in the drawer." I didn't ask why she didn't offer me a choice of rooms. I didn't ask why there were no other guests in the lobby, or why the elevators creaked in protest when I pressed the button. I just took the key, climbed the narrow staircase, and slipped into my room. The room was clean enough, though there was a heaviness to it, as if the air itself were denser than usual. I dropped my bags, locked the door, and collapsed onto the bed. Sleep came quickly, the kind of deep, unrelenting sleep that makes you forget the world exists for a few hours. When I woke, the sunlight slanted through the curtains, though it looked more like a sickly yellow than the warm gold of a typical morning. Something felt off. I glanced in the mirror, brushing my hair back, and froze. My reflection wasn't exactly my own. My eyes were the same color, the same shape, but my face looked subtly different. Sharper cheekbones, a hint of darkness under my eyes, as if I had aged or changed overnight. I laughed it off. Jet lag, stress, whatever. I didn't notice anything else until I left the room to explore the hotel. The hallways seemed endless, stretching further than they should. Doors were all numbered, yet every one I passed whispered faintly, like voices just behind the wood. Occasionally, I caught a glimpse of someone at the far end of the hallway, a figure standing perfectly still, always watching, disappearing when I blinked. I went down to the lobby to ask for some coffee, maybe some sense of normalcy. The woman at the desk didn't acknowledge me. Her head was tilted slightly, and she stared past me, toward the far wall. Behind her, the shadows seemed to twist, like they were alive. The air had that same iron dust smell, stronger now. By the second day, the changes became harder to ignore. My hands, my arms, even my voice seemed slightly wrong. When I spoke on the phone to my office, my colleagues said I sounded tired, almost like someone else was reading my words aloud. I thought I was imagining it until I caught myself in the mirror again. The face staring back was no longer entirely mine. There was something calculating there, like a stranger had carved subtle marks into my skin while I slept. I tried to leave. I packed my bag, went to the front desk, but the key I had was gone. The woman wasn't at her desk. The lobby seemed empty, yet the air was thicker, more oppressive. I stumbled toward the exit and found the door locked. Panic started to set in. I tried the side exit, the fire stairs. Every door led me back to the same hallway. I was trapped. That night, I heard voices, low, murmuring, almost hypnotic. They came from the walls, the floorboards, the ceilings. "You belong here," they said. "You're ready." I stayed in my room, huddled under the covers, but sleep came anyway. It always comes in the Hawthorne, no matter how terrified you are. The next morning, I noticed other guests, or what I thought were guests. Faces peeking from behind half-closed doors, shadows slipping along the hallways. None of them spoke. Their expressions were blank, empty, as if they had been hollowed out, and yet, when they looked at me, there was recognition, not of me, but of something else, something they expected me to understand. I tried writing down what was happening, hoping the act of recording it would preserve my mind. The pages looked normal at first. Then the words began to change. Names I didn't know appeared in my handwriting, dates and events I couldn't have remembered. I could feel my memory shifting, melting into something else. By the third day, I was no longer sure who I was. My reflection in the mirror now looked like a completely different person. And worse, I didn't recognize my own voice when I spoke. I asked the staff for help, but the woman only smiled and whispered, "You'll see soon enough." And that's when I understood. This hotel doesn't just host travelers. It reshapes them, takes their fears, their essence, and molds them into something the Hawthorne wants, something new. I tried to escape again, screaming in the hallways, pounding on doors, but the hotel had a way of warping space. The hallways twisted endlessly. The doors led to rooms I'd never seen. Mirrors reflected faces that weren't mine, and shadows slithered along the edges of my vision. By the fourth night, I had stopped trying. I surrendered to it. And that's when the real horror began. The changes became permanent. My thoughts weren't my own, my memories weren't mine, and yet I was fully aware of every small, meticulous alteration to my mind and body. The Hawthorne was patient. It worked slowly, precisely, until it had erased the person it had captured and replaced them with something else entirely. I am no longer who I was when I first arrived. My colleagues wouldn't recognize me. My family wouldn't know me. But that doesn't matter. I have been given purpose now. I walk the hallways silently, watching the new arrivals, guiding them subtly, whispering to them, ensuring they settle in comfortably. They don't notice me at first. No one ever does. And yet, sometimes, I see a reflection that is almost my old self. It stares at me in panic, begging, pleading for the person I used to be. I look away, and the reflection smiles. I no longer belong to myself. I belong to the Hawthorne. Last night, a man arrived. Just like I once did, nervous, tired, desperate for a room. I smiled and handed him the key. "Room 12, I said. "Enjoy your stay." He looked at me, truly looked, and I swear I saw a flicker of recognition. The same fear I had felt when I first arrived. The same disbelief. I wanted to warn him, to scream at him, that he would never leave the way he came in. But I couldn't. I was the hotel now. I am the walls, the mirrors, the shadows, the whispers in the night. And as he turned the key in the door and disappeared into the room, I realized the final, horrifying truth. The Hawthorne doesn't just change guests. It consumes them. And the person I was already gone. The twist? Sometimes, when the new arrivals scream in their sleep, I hear a voice that sounds eerily like mine, crying from a room I've never entered. And I know that somewhere deep inside the hotel, the original me is still trapped, watching, waiting, silently screaming, powerless to escape the hotel that has already claimed them. The Hawthorne isn't just a place to stay. It's a place that stays with you. It's a place that takes you apart and puts something else in your place. And the more guests it changes, the more it grows, until there's nothing left of anyone who walked through its doors. So if you ever see a hotel sitting quietly on the side of a foggy road, its sign flickering weakly in the mist, and it calls to you, don't answer, don't go inside. Because if you do, the Hawthorne will welcome you. And when you leave, you won't even remember the person you were. And maybe, just maybe, someone like me will be waiting to greet you. This story is structured to fill about 30 minutes when read at a calm, suspenseful narration pace, 150 words per minute. I can also create a separate YouTube-ready description, tags, and SEO-friendly title for this story that maximizes reach if you want. Do you want me to do that next? Story, Part 2. I was running late that night, the rain hammering against my windshield like tiny fists, and every GPS signal seemed to vanish as soon as I turned down the darker streets. That's when I saw the hotel. Not the kind of place you would stop at normally. It looked tired, worn, as if it had existed in that spot long before anyone cared to notice. The sign flickered weakly, the Ashmore Inn. I needed a room, any room. My car had begun to sputter, and I couldn't go any further. So I pulled in and pushed open the glass doors, which creaked like they hadn't been opened in years. The lobby was dimly lit. The carpet was a deep red, so dark it almost looked black in the corners. A small reception desk sat in the center, and behind it, a man with thinning gray hair and eyes too sharp for his age stared at me silently. He nodded, wordlessly, and slid a key across the desk. "Room 7, he said. "Elevator's out of order. Stairs to the left." I didn't ask why the elevator was out of order. I didn't ask why there were no other guests. The air was cold, almost unnaturally so, and it carried the faint metallic scent of old machinery. Room 7 was small but serviceable. The bed sagged slightly. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender and something else, something metallic. I dropped my bag and went to the bathroom, and that's when I noticed it. My reflection didn't quite match. My hairline looked different. My eyes looked older, sharper. I shook it off. Maybe it was the lighting. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the bed shift under me, subtle movements like someone breathing on the mattress. When I finally fell asleep, I dreamed of the hotel itself, hallways that stretched forever, mirrors reflecting rooms that didn't exist, doors opening to black voids. Voices whispered my name, coaxing me further into the building. The next morning, I went to the lobby to get some coffee. There was no coffee. There was no one, just the gray-haired man standing in the shadows by the reception desk, watching. When I asked him about breakfast, he tilted his head slightly. "Breakfast?" he murmured. "It's not ready yet. Come back later." Later, I found myself wandering the halls. I thought I remembered the layout from last night, but the corridors twisted, doubled back, leading me to rooms I had never seen. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of other guests in the mirrors, people standing perfectly still, staring back at me. Their faces were familiar, but I couldn't place them. I realized with a shock, they weren't just staring, they were looking through me. By the second day, my reflection had changed more noticeably. My hands were different. They weren't mine, not exactly. When I looked at my face, it seemed like someone else had been carving away at my features while I slept. I couldn't explain it, and when I tried to call for help, my phone refused to connect. I began trying to leave. I packed my bags, went to the front desk, but the key had disappeared. The man wasn't there. The exit doors refused to open. Each time I tried a window, the streets below looked unfamiliar, as if the hotel had moved. Panic set in. I was trapped. By the third night, I was changing from the inside out. Thoughts that weren't mine crept into my mind. Memories that weren't mine flickered through my consciousness. Small things like favorite foods, favorite songs, even personal fears. The hotel was learning me, consuming me, rewriting me. Then I saw the first transformation fully. A guest who had checked in before me appeared in the hall, but it wasn't really him. His eyes were empty, his face a slightly altered version of himself, and he moved through the halls like a shadow of what he used to be. When he noticed me, he smiled. But it wasn't a smile I recognized. It was the hotel smiling, through him. By the fourth day, I couldn't tell what parts of me were still mine. The hotel seemed alive, responding to my thoughts, guiding me into rooms I hadn't yet explored. The mirrors now showed me countless versions of myself, each one slightly different, each one whispering, "You will stay. You belong here." On the fifth night, I understood. The hotel doesn't just change guests, it replaces them. It erases who they were and molds them into something it desires. And the longer you stay, the less resistance you have. I wasn't a guest anymore. I was part of the hotel's machinery. I walked the halls, greeted newcomers, subtly guiding them to rooms, ensuring they would stay and change. And then came the twist. One morning, A new guest arrived. He looked tired, desperate, carrying the same fear I once carried. I smiled at him, handed him the key to room 7, and said, "Enjoy your stay." But as he turned the key, I caught my reflection in the lobby mirror. Only this time, it wasn't me. It was the gray-haired man from the desk, calm, patient, knowing everything. And somewhere deep within the mirror, I saw a flicker of my old self, trapped behind the glass, watching. I realized then that the Ashmore Inn doesn't just change people, it stores them. And when it consumes enough guests, it doesn't discard them. It keeps them trapped, watching as the hotel continues its work. The new guest entered the room. The door closed behind him, and I stayed behind the desk, smiling, knowing the hotel had chosen me as its next host. And somewhere deep within the walls, the real me screamed silently. The Ashmore Inn waits for travelers like you, and if you ever see it, if it calls to you through the rain or fog, remember, it doesn't just change guests, it keeps them. And sometimes it even makes them the one who welcomes the next unsuspecting visitor. This story is continuous, realistic, and has that shocking twist where the narrator realizes they've become part of the hotel while their old self is trapped. A slightly different angle from the first one. I can also convert this new story into Bangla, like I did for the first one, ready for YouTube narration. Do you want me to do that next? Story Part 3. I never meant to stay at the Blackwood Hotel. I was driving home after a long day, exhausted, when the storm hit. Sheets of rain reduced visibility to nothing, and the GPS insisted I turn down a road that didn't exist on my map. And there it was, an old, almost forgotten building, half hidden behind overgrown trees, its sign swinging in the wind, Blackwood Hotel. I needed shelter. Any shelter. I parked and hesitated only a moment before stepping inside. The lobby was colder than the storm outside, and the carpet was worn so thin in some places I could see the floorboards beneath. The air smelled faintly of rust, mold, and something metallic that made my stomach turn. Behind the desk, a man with deep-set eyes and a gray, lined face looked at me and said nothing. Then he slid a key across the counter. Room 9, 3rd floor. Don't stray. I laughed nervously. Don't stray? He just nodded and returned to the shadows. The stairwell creaked as I climbed. Room 9 was small, with a bed, a dresser, and a mirror that seemed too large for the space. I dropped my bag and went to wash my hands, and froze at my reflection. My hair was different, slightly longer than I remembered, darker at the roots, my jawline sharper. I blinked, rubbed my face, and it was still there. Something had shifted. Sleep didn't come easily. When I finally dozed off, the dreams were vivid, horrifying. The hallways stretched longer than possible. Mirrors reflected not me, but other guests. People standing perfectly still, staring through me. Doors opened to rooms that didn't exist. I awoke in a cold sweat, my heartbeat pounding. By morning, I noticed my voice had changed. I tried calling a friend, but they said, "You sound different. Are you okay?" When I looked in the mirror again, it wasn't just my features. It was my expression, my posture. I felt wrong. I wandered the hallways. There were other guests now, though they never spoke. Shadows moved around them, almost guiding them, twisting them. One guest caught my eye and smiled, but it wasn't human. It was as if the hotel was smiling through him. The days blended together. I lost track of time. Breakfast and lunch came and went, but I wasn't sure I ate. I tried leaving. The front door was gone. The stairwell led me to floors I had never seen, each lined with rooms with flickering lights. I called the reception desk, but it was empty. No man, no staff, just silence and the faint metallic scent in the air. I began to notice changes that were undeniable. My fingers, my arms, even my skin texture seemed different. I tried writing a note, but the words rearranged themselves on the page. Names, dates, and events that weren't mine appeared in neat handwriting. The hotel was learning me, reshaping me, consuming the essence of who I was. By the 4th day, The mirrors no longer reflected me. They reflected the hotel. Hallways twisted endlessly in reflection. I could see past guests trapped in the walls, faces pale, mouths open in silent screams, eyes hollow. Some seemed aware of me, others oblivious, walking the halls as if sleepwalking. Then came the voices, soft whispers at first, just at the edge of hearing. You belong here, you are ready. I tried to resist, to fight it, but the voices grew stronger, echoing in every room. My thoughts were no longer my own. Memories I had never lived flickered in my mind. Small things at first, favorite songs, old fears, fleeting moments from other lives. By the fifth night, I realized the horrifying truth. The hotel doesn't just change guests. It replaces them. It erases them completely, molding each into something that serves it. And the longer I stayed, the more I felt myself fading. And then I saw him. A new guest arrived. Young, nervous, exhausted, dripping wet from the rain. He looked like me on that first night. I smiled, handed him the key to room 9, and said, "Enjoy your stay." But as he walked away, the mirrors in the lobby caught my reflection. And it wasn't me. My old face, trapped behind glass, pale and desperate, reaching out silently. And I realized I had become part of the hotel. I was no longer a person. I was an extension of it. The new guest entered the room. The door closed, and the cycle continued. Somewhere deep within the walls, the original me still exists, screaming silently as I greet the next arrival. The Blackwood Hotel waits for travelers lost, tired, desperate. And when it finds them, it doesn't just host them, it owns them. So if you see an old abandoned hotel in the fog or rain, flickering in the distance, do not enter. If you do, you will not leave the same. If you want, I can convert this new story into Bangla too, just like the previous two. Do you want me to do that next? The end.